Hey, thank you very much for joining us. My name is Greg Warner. I'm the CEO and founder of Market Smart, and I'm also the inventor of several tools and free tools, which we'll talk about today, that I like to give away to the sector. One of them is called the Fundraising Report Card. All right, we'll get the show on the road here. Yeah, and also, if you haven't yet, or you're interested in reading my book, it's titled Engagement Fundraising, just reach out to me or us at Market Smart. You'll get a, you can just do info@imarketsmart.com, and we'll even send you a copy for free, audiobook if you prefer, digital files. You don't have to buy it, but all the money does go to charity if you do decide to buy it anyway. All right, so today's agenda, this is the fifth, I can't believe it's 5 years, maybe it's, yeah, the fifth annual Fundraising Report Card, Fundraising Climate Change presentation. So we're really racking up the years here, and what we're gonna do, if you've been here before, you know the drill for every year that we post this information. We're gonna first go through some dizzying data. It might make your head spin at first, but I'll try and take it a little bit on the slow side. There's quite a lot here. And then because unfortunately, and I should be somber about this, I mean, unfortunately, the numbers are getting worse. Like fundraising climate change is getting worse each year, and this year is no different. There hasn't been much improvement. So I'm gonna provide for you 3 strategies you might want to consider that will help you rise above and beyond and surf beyond these issues that most organizations are facing. Now, at the very end, I want to take questions. So if you want to stay on, we'll have plenty of time for questions, but I'll also give you a 1-2 about Market Smart. It's like a minute and a half about what we do and how we're combating this fundraising climate change. Of course, fundraising climate change is a phrase that I made up to encapsulate what I see happening in the sector that is highly disturbing, frankly. All right, so let's jump right in and talk about shrinking donor bases. People keep talking about donors down, dollars up. So let's take a look at that. This report from the Lilly School at Indiana, if you hadn't seen it yet, and by the way, these slides will be available to you. We'll send you an email, a follow-up with the recording and the slides. You may want to share these with your board or your leadership. This Lilly School report from, I think it was last year, maybe 18 months ago, showed that the percentage of Americans who give is declining massively. And most of that decline, from 2/3 to a half of Americans, happened after the Great Recession of 2007 to 2009. So in other words, it's picking up pace, the number of people who are no longer giving. The report also said that the average dollar amount that Americans gave is going down. I have to tell you that this is the only outlier that I haven't seen corroborated with our data. We're actually seeing the average gift amount going up. So there's probably a difference. I mean, ours is coming directly from the charities, the data. I don't know exactly how they're working on their data, so it's just maybe a different data set. But this is odd that the number of people giving to charity would be going down when the population in America generally increases by about 0.6% to about 1% a year. You know, we got more people, but we're not getting more donors. Also perplexing is that the number of older people, the baby boomers, are finally moving into their peak giving years, but that's not resulting in, it's not becoming more donors to your causes. So we were hoping, of course, when we all thought about baby boomers moving into this window of their lifetimes, we thought that that would translate, and maybe it is translating into more dollars perhaps, but not more donors. Another thing is if we look at companies like Starbucks and whatnot, and really, well, let me say it like this. Let me back up and say the economy was on track, and it still kind of is on track. I mean, all the economic data that comes out, the economy just keeps rocking. Of course, the Fed is trying to put a damper on that, and I'm no economist, but the thing that's interesting to me is that as the economy keeps marching on and people have money in their pockets and unemployment is low, they'll spend $6 on a coffee, but they won't give $6 to a charity. That's disconcerting. We'll talk about why that is in a little while. Also, something that I think most of us know is that the decline of religiosity is driving people away from giving. Of course, some religions include tithing, many, and that's one thing. So if you have fewer people who are religious, then the number of people who are tithing is going to go down. But so there's tons of data on this. Here's just one, that the percent of people in the US who state that they have no religion keeps increasing. And we all know that the more important that religion is to a person, the more likely they will be to give to charity. The giving to religion as a share of total giving is also declining, both coming out of this report. One other thing that might be controversial, and I'm not sure I can really put my finger on this, is this, this sort of growing acceptance of socialism, however different people define that. I'll use that as the broad term. There's variations, of course, and not trying to get into political arguments, but there is a trend of more positive views towards socialism than capitalism among the younger generation. Maybe that'll change when they get older. I don't know, but this is just looking at millennials and Gen Zers. And it's actually, what this is showing is that, because it's the lighter green color, is the positive views of socialism, which for those younger people, that's probably, that's remained fairly steady, but at a high level, 48, 49. But then you look at the Gen Xers, it's growing. That's my generation, from 31% positive in 2010 to 39% now. And then the baby boomers have remained rather consistent. So I'm not sure. I used to think that, well, maybe this has something to do with it. Charitable giving is highly connected to a capitalist mentality. The more socialist a country is, the less there is charity. So I'm putting that into the mix of why this might be happening. The biggest reason, though, is very simple. It's a matter of trust, and trust is correlated with giving and volunteerism. When you have low trust, you have low giving and low volunteerism. Kind of makes sense. Why would you give or engage so deeply and give of your time if you don't trust the organization or organizations as a whole? So if this is, our society is becoming less trusting, which I think all of us, especially in this the days of the way the media works and politics and misinformation, and then people who are charged with misinformation are saying that the charge of misinformation is in fact misinformation, right? I mean, nobody trusts anybody anymore, and it's very disconcerting. There was research done by Give.org asking people if they trusted charities more or less or the same as they did 5 years ago. And what they found was that a very small percentage of people trusted charities more. A third trust them less, and then a little more than half said, well, it's about the same. So that third that trusts charities less is going to be a problem, of course. What was interesting in this report, and again, the links are all there, is that only 10% were optimistic that their trust would improve over time. So, the gold standard, though, when it comes to trust is this Edelman Trust Barometer. I find it fascinating, their reports and such. If you ever get time and you want to sort of just sink into some data and some interesting things, check it out. But they have a portion of their research that's focused on NGOs, is what they call them, nonprofits, non-government organizations. Now, back in 2018, they found a very large drop in trust, 9% drop. Now, but what's even worse is that among the informed public, which is generally going to be the donors that have the most money, the drop was even worse. I mean, just tremendous. Also, a couple of years later, or I'm sorry, it was the same year, the report for the first time ever found that nonprofits were trusted less than private sector businesses, right? See, the green kind of teal color is business. The darker color is NGOs. And this continues to this day, I mean, to last year, is that their most recent report said that NGOs still score higher than government and media in terms of trust, but slightly below business. So that's quite fascinating. And I could go on and on. I mean, there's another report here about trust in civil society. Just down, down, down. Trust is going down. I haven't seen new data on this in a long time. The person who actually put this together a while back is retired, so I guess the philanthropic trust is not doing it anymore. But I think we all can guess that the number of nonprofits just keeps increasing, especially because many of us might know people who just create them on their computer and start doing 5K runs or raffles or bake sales and such. I mean, it's not as hard as it used to be to start something, even though maybe people don't know what they're doing. So this increases competition. It sort of diffuses the number of options that there are for people to give to. So while your brand may be strong and your organization may be around for so long, nothing beats somebody in your neighborhood asking you to participate and to give and share. So with all this being said, and with the number of people just plain dropping out of charitable giving as a whole, I find it fascinating that the total number of dollars being given to charity continues to go up. Generally, it goes up at about the same pace as the growth of the GDP. Now, we are predicting, our president actually early, I guess it was last year, predicted what kind of growth rate the government believes will happen, and it's kind of anemic. I mean, we're preparing for very low GDP growth over the next couple of years. Generally, charitable giving as a whole, the dollar amounts grow at about the same pace as the GDP. We'll see if that starts to deviate over time. Right now it's at, well, 485 billion. The 2022 numbers have not come out yet. They usually come out, I think, in around May, maybe June. Okay, so what you're going to see next, that's kind of like laying out the state of the union and the playing field of the macroeconomic indicators, high-level indicators. What you're going to see next comes from my fundraising report card, which is a little invention I had my team create a few years ago, and we ended up giving it away to the sector. You can use it today. It's at fundraisingreportcard.com. And you can upload your data. It's anonymous data. It's easy. And you can even get some help there's one of our staff, Megan, down there. And you'll see how you're doing. And you can compare it to others, because there is a benchmarks page at the top. There's a link. You can see the benchmarks for each sector, meaning like education, environmental, and we're going to go through those numbers today as a recap of what happened last year. So this is a free tool. It's my pleasure. This is part of my philanthropic strategy of how I give back to society. And yeah, I hope you'll use it. I think there's about 15,000 users now that have been contributing data to this, so that I can provide you with the following information. All right, so let's get into it. Well, the average, this is what I was alluding to earlier, is that the average donation, according to our data, has been increasing, not decreasing, like we saw from that report from the Lilly School. I got to be honest, I don't know how to square that. I don't think this is the most important metric anyway, so I'm just going to kind of whiz past this, but that is what we're seeing. This is what's coming out of our tool. I have ideas about that, but I'll mention them later. Next, though, is let's talk about revenue retention. And this one's a little hard for people to get their mind around if they're not an accountant, or, I mean, most people get it. But so revenue retention, that's not donor retention. That's not about people. That's about how much they gave was retained the following year. So if someone gave $100, did they give $100 the next year? Did they give $50, or did they give 150? How much of that revenue was retained? Or did they give nothing, which makes it very hard to retain revenue, of course. So software companies, technology companies like mine are very, very concerned and focus a lot on revenue retention. Okay, Market Smart, as a for instance, we have a 98% revenue retention. Okay, I actually want it to be 105% as CEO. That's my goal, is that we retain all the revenue. Even if we lose a customer or two, we retain all the revenue and gain some. So in other words, we encourage our current customers to buy more or refer us, so we get new customers would be new customers. That's not revenue retention, but we encourage them to buy more from us so that we can make up for any lost revenue. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is that if the goal for a technology company in the private sector is 105%, and we are unhappy with 98%, then it's kind of, I guess I'm really just taking a whack at the sector, saying that 45% is just terrible. It's just terrible. It means that you need to generate like 65%, or I'm sorry, 55% of that revenue. You have to backfill all that revenue every single year, and it's getting worse. It's getting harder for you to do that. So of course, what aligns with this is donor retention. I mean, you can't retain revenue if you don't retain the donor. And donor retention now, for 5 years doing this, in general is going down. Now, this is the average, and I'm going to really split apart this data into many different ways of looking at it. But in general, it's going down. So let's split it apart. Let's look at first-time donor retention, reactivated donor retention. Those are the people who were who renewed after, I mean, they fell away, they stopped giving, and then we convinced them to reactivate. Repeat donors is consistent. They never fell away, just one after the other. Okay, so let's take a look at that. And of course, first you have first-time donors, and that's going to be in this mustard color. 5 years ago, it was upwards of 27%. Now it's below 20% for first-time donors on average. The reactivated donors had been on a downward trend. We got a slight bump up on that last year. I am not sure if that's going to continue, and we're bottoming out on retaining reactivated donors. We'll have to see next year, but generally the trend has been downward. Repeat donor retention has been fairly consistent. So what that means is once you find someone who's fairly loyal, they're pretty much, they're in for the long haul. So let's break this down again in a different way by looking at the low dollar donors, the more transactional donors giving cash, credit card, and let's compare it to the $5,000 and up donors, usually referred to as the major donors. And in most cases, they're giving assets, and they're not doing it impulsively like a cash gift will be done, or transactionally. It's more relationally. So the first look at this, we'll see that the under $100 donors back in 2020, just as a comparison, it's just a couple of years ago, was 23%, but it fell now to under 19%. It's funny, I looked in our report card today to see what the because it updates every night. And I think ours is the only data that updates every single day. And we got a really big data set in, really big. So this went up like 0.04% or something. So if you look at it today, it's going to be somewhat inaccurate. It's never going to stay consistent all the time, but it's still pretty close. So yeah, that's disconcerting. It is, and this is why I call it fundraising climate change. It just kind of happens year after year. The interesting thing, though, is that over $5,000 donors, they are increasing in retention rate. Generally, they stay pretty much consistent. It's always been 37, 38, 39, somewhere around there. And that's fascinating to me, that the higher dollar donors, I guess the more you give, the more committed you are to the cause, and the more likely you are to continue giving. So I'm going to lay them out this way so it's easier for you to see. Like, let's look at these. The first ones on the left are the average donation amount for the under $100 donors compared to the average donation amount for the over $5,000 donors. Of course, there's a wide disparity here. The average donation for the low dollar donors is only $25, while for the over $5,000 donors, it's almost $40,000. The retention rate, like I said a minute ago, is 18%. While for the over $5,000 donors, it's almost 40%. And the lifetime value when you acquire a low dollar donor is only $45. But when you acquire a larger major donor, the lifetime value, not including bequests, by the way, of course, and the larger, wealthier donors tend to leave much bigger bequests, of course. But their lifetime value is $78,000. So it kind of makes you wonder, when I know we're trying to acquire donors so that we can find major donors. Frankly, I think that traditional approach should be killed. It doesn't make sense in this day and age, but I'll save that for a blog post. Maybe I'll hint at it. it doesn't work. There are other ways to acquire donors without so much transactional, high cost, environmental killing, tree killing, polluting, postage eating, you know, postal trucks driving around, and on and on. Can you tell that I'm not a fan? Okay, so what this means, what we're seeing here is that what used to be known as the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle, where 20% of your donors, people would say, supply 80% of your revenue. Well, now it's more like 76% of your revenue comes from just 0.74% of your donors. Another way to read this is donors giving over $5,000 make up, on average, 0.74% of your database, your donors. So, but they make up, that few number of people make up almost 75% of your donation revenue. The donors giving under $100 make up 76% of your donor base, but only make up about 5% of your revenue. Something to consider, when you're, so now my friend Trisha, who's helping me here, is gonna do a poll, or actually I'll do the poll. I could do it. I'm gonna launch a poll to see, compared to 5 years ago, do you feel fewer people are donating? Are you seeing that at your organization as well? Maybe you're an outlier. Maybe it's that our data could possibly be wrong. I just want to get a little confirmation here. I'm going to give it maybe another 5-7 seconds. Let everybody get in here. Oh, wow, we already have almost 100 people. Okay, so I'll give you 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's see what we see. You should be able to see this. So most, 62%, said absolutely. Compared to 5 years ago, you feel fewer people are donating. 14% say definitely not, and then there's 23% say not sure. Probably don't have access to that kind of information in your organization. Completely understandable. So that's interesting. That's interesting. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so let's move on. All right, so some of this reason for why we spend so much time acquiring new donors is what I call populist fundraising. I personally believe that populist fundraising is best suited for political campaigns, because essentially giving equals votes in that regard. There's also some community-minded people who kind of will say, well, we've got to give everybody a chance to give. It's almost as if having a website and a donate now button on it doesn't give everybody a chance. Instead, you've got to spend money sending them mail in order to give people a chance. I'm not quite sure I understand that. Maybe people can explain it in the chat. The other area where populist fundraising makes sense is in bequest giving and legacy fundraising, because anybody can make a legacy gift. So that kind of makes some sense. But otherwise, populist fundraising is very expensive. And I remember Dr. James talking about this in a webinar once, Dr. Russell James, where he said, well, if you can afford to be more equitable in your approach to soliciting funds and giving everybody an opportunity, if you can afford to do that, by all means. But his recommendation was that if your budgets are tight, you're going to need to be tight about who you're engaging and targeting. So let me show you this in some data. For instance, is that the Lilly Schools study found that 82% of legacy giving dollars came from 20% of the donors. And if you look at 10%, top 10% of the donors, that equaled 2/3 of legacy giving dollars. So that's interesting. Again, I think it goes to the fact that people with greater wealth are fewer, of course, and can make bigger legacy gifts. But this was a study that came out a couple of years before Dr. Russell James's new books. And interestingly, his new most recent research found that 1 out of 1,000 donors generate 96, that's 0.1% of the donor population, generate 96.2% of charitable bequest dollars. So that doesn't square up with what the Lilly School put out. So I'm not trying to create a food fight here, but I tend to trust Dr. James, probably because he's my friend. But and he's a rigorous researcher. So just something to think about. What we recommend at MarketSmart is that you generate as many leads and engage people at as low cost as possible for legacy giving. And then you try to find these outliers. Who could possibly be a 1 out of 1,000 type of legacy gift donor? You got to find them and then really provide them with value. So, okay, let's move on and talk about, well, if we see this happening, like why is this happening besides those macroeconomic and social constructs that I was talking about recently? One of the big challenges facing folks like you who, by all means, don't deserve this report. You know, you're working very hard, and it's not fair. It's almost like I'm hitting you over the head telling you this stuff, but meanwhile, you're working very hard. Something that's way beyond your control is that there's more channels now than there ever have been for you to communicate with your supporters. So if there's so many more channels, it just makes it makes it so hard to get your message out there and to engage people. You have to be an expert in so many different kinds of marketing. It's not fair. It's hard, and I have a lot of empathy for you about that. Also, though, something that is not completely beyond your control, something that you probably should adapt to, is the fact that donor preferences are just plain changing. Donors want to be more self-sufficient in the way that they make their giving decisions. It kind of hit me in the head when I saw in an article, an interview of Penelope Burke. This is kind of to me, a famous book, Donor-Centered Fundraising, but she was interviewed in Advancing Philanthropy, AFP's magazine, where she surveyed 3,000 bequest donors and asked, do you have a planned gift officer? And I was sad to see that only 18% said yes. And their attitude was basically like, look, they give me everything I need, but I don't need much from them. So that's disconcerting when you consider how great the talent is in the sector for planned gift staff. I mean, there's the wealth of knowledge is unbelievable, but it's not really their fault. It's just that preferences are changing. People want to do their own research on their own time, and they want to make their own decisions without somebody there. It's kind of like whenever I'm in and you probably felt this, when you go to a clothing store and then someone comes up to you and says, do you need any help? And maybe sometimes you kind of do. You're like looking for a certain size or something, but for whatever reason, we just say, no, I don't need help. And then they walk away and you're like, darn it, where'd they go? I need them now. You know, so I think as humans, we just react like we don't want help. It's kind of interesting about that. All right, so I call this in my book, I call this the 4 selves, talking about self-sufficiency, is that it's important that we allow people to be self-sufficient. Like if that's what people want, let them self-qualify, let them opt in for engagement. Let them opt in for cultivation. Let them opt in most importantly, if you're a major gifts person, to your caseload. Like, you should never target someone and presuppose that they should be in your caseload. There's a great book by a guy named David Lively where he's studied the heck out of this. And he said, nobody should be in a caseload unless they know that they're going to be solicited and that they're working on a gift with you. So I agree. I don't think there should be a game. It should be like, let them self-qualify and tell you they want to be in your caseload. Let them self-educate online, make information available and accessible. Let them self-involve, let them watch videos, let them see and view stories that you share with them, and ultimately let them self-solicit. I know this is very contradictory. This is very counterintuitive, but this is the beginning of the pivot that needs to be made. And as I said, I talked to you about this in my book. It has to be done. It's very uncomfortable to not be in control. But if you give control to the donors, they will react more positively and they won't drop out of giving altogether. Another, to file this under preferences are changing, is that people don't like junk mail, telemarketing, spam. I have a mentor who lives in Florida, and in his gated community of retirees, at every outdoor, it's like a mailbox that has 15 different homes mail in the platform. They voted to make sure that each one of those got a recycle bin next to it so that they could take the solicitations and not have to bring them into the house. They could just throw them right from the postal worker directly from, then it goes into their mailbox, and then they throw it right into the recycle bin. And truth be known, because I was in this business a long time, 15 years before this new business, relatively new, and most of that stuff actually doesn't get recycled. So that's a problem. Maybe for paper bags, they'll turn it into. So people are not as accommodating about those old ways to do it. Okay, so if the number of charities, the competition is growing, the amount given to charity is increasing, the number of people giving is declining, right? Trust is declining, fraction of the donor base is making up the majority of the revenue, the channels are fragmenting, the preferences are changing like we just went into. Woo! What is happening? Giving is increasing. Just like I said, here's from Giving USA, it's larger gifts from richer donors, and smaller mid-level donors are slowly just disappearing. And Brian Lauterbach followed this up. Nonprofits are challenged by this, and most organizations are finding themselves flat-footed and unable to easily adapt. It's a big pivot that needs to be made here, which leads to our second poll, is do you believe that fundraising climate change is real? That's as I'm describing it. So I'm going to launch this poll really quick. Bear with me just a second. Can I do this? Oh, you know what? I don't know. Let's see. Poll number 2. All right. Hopefully you can see it. Yeah, here come the votes. Do you believe? Have I turned you into a believer? All right. By the way, I have to speed up this webinar if we make it out on time. So I'm just going to give you maybe another 4 seconds. 3, 2, 1. All right, and I'll share those results. Yeah, okay. There's a lot. There's almost 90% say yes. All right. Yeah, that's what I kind of figured. All right. So, all right, so let's move it along. What are we going to do about this? All right, let's have some happy talk, right? If the donor preferences are changing, people are fed up, man. even you, if you get this mail and the emails and stuff, I mean, I got something from 2 different schools. Actually, no, well, yeah, there's several. My kids are in college now. My wife's alumni association. I mean, I get them and they tell me that there's a day that I'm supposed to give, like today is your giving day. You know, it's just, I don't like that. It's like, don't tell me when I'm supposed to give. It doesn't really make sense, but it does internally, I guess, to the charity, but not to the donors. What donors want is they want more fairness and transparency, respect, control. They want to be asked for permission to call them, to opt them in, to put them in a caseload. They want to self-navigate the decision-making process, and they want everything to be made convenient. Whew, that's a big ask, but that's the way it is. This is what they want, and they have the money. So we have to deliver them with value, or deliver to them value. And when we treat them fairly, the way they want to be treated, they'll signal that they're ready to give. I see it every day, especially with our system and our software. But hounding someone for attention or action before they're ready is only going to annoy them. And we all know this instinctively. It's always the person that annoys us that we just want them to go away forever. So there are going to be winners and losers in this. There's like when you think about some of the traditional ways of doing things and what they've been replaced with in the past 20 years, 25, 30 years, the commonality is technology. You know, so technology is, well, yeah, we could get into this, is that especially for colleges and universities, the smaller ones are in the red, but it's technology that helps you cut costs and helps you sort of surf and have fun while fundraising climate change may be happening to others. But if you do this pivot, you can kind of surf and skate right past this. And making this pivot, ultimately, if the board and leadership can understand, then it makes fundraisers happier, and because it makes the donors happier. Everybody gets happier when you invest in technology. It's a little self-serving for me to say, since we're a technology company, but it's been proven, like I was just showing you with those old traditional kinds of businesses. So, okay, so let's talk about 3 things that you can do to solve this problem, at least somewhat, for your organization. And first, realize there's no quick fixes here. The traditional, more interruptive, transactional, arm's length approaches that are focused on asking for small gifts are really that are made most impulsively by people. That's annoying people, right? So you've got to have patience, and you're going to want to bring in a more contemporary, tech-enabled, compassionate, they call it donor-centric approach that helps donors self-navigate the decision-making process, especially for highly considered decisions, not the transactional ones, the decisions centered around gifts of assets. Remember, the average lifetime value of the donors of assets compared to it was $78,000 compared to $25 for the low dollar donors. So the 3 recommendations I have for you is, number 1, we recommend you focus on the 80-20. That doesn't mean that you give up all of everything else you're already doing. However, I would only try to acquire new donors that are wealthier and would consider giving assets even in their first gift. I don't believe in the fundraising pyramid. I don't think that although you can find a major donor who started out giving 25 bucks, we see it every day that that's no longer the case. It may never have been really the case. It's very easy to do a regression analysis that sort of proves that theory, but we see people coming on for the first time, giving 1,000, 10,000 and plus gifts all the time, not through solicitation, but first through value, getting value, whether that's helping them opt in to a subscription, a newsletter, taking a tour, and such. So when I also say focus on the 80-20, like think about your budget. If 76% of your revenue is coming from the tippy top of your pyramid, less than 1% of your donors, where's your budget? Like, are you spending 76% of your fundraising budget on helping more major donors find you, engage with you, give, opt in, and give to you? Or are you focusing most of your budget on the 5% of revenue that comes from 75% of your donors, if I remember right? Most organizations are sort of upside down, where most of the budget goes to events and more transactional giving and such. It doesn't make sense exactly, unless you believe in the fundraising pyramid, but I can debunk that in a longer meeting. So where do you find new major donors who would be willing to give assets? Well, the first is through referrals. You might ask your major donors, but that's kind of hard to do unless you have a good relationship with them face to face. So what we do is we do it through technology for our customers, and we get them all the time where people decide that they would want to make a personal introduction. And if they're wealthy in the first place, they're going to be probably have wealthy friends. Okay. Another way to do this is with a mini survey in a board packet. Like every time the board gets together, why not just keep asking, do you have anybody that might want to engage and that cares about this cause as well? That's a layup. The bigger pond is in your volunteers. So volunteers can be easily overlooked, but and they're in your midst, and they're often wealthy. But why are they well? They're testing you. You know, they want to get their feet on the ground. They want to get more involved. But if their experience is poor, that's going to be a really big problem, because if they're volunteering at 2 or 3 organizations, they're going to give more to the one that they see has their act together. The other data point coming from the US Trust study is that they want to give. So I'm saying find those new major donors among your volunteers. And then we do this as well. We can help with it. But I thought I'd give credit to another company that does it, is just asking the right target audience if they'd like to subscribe to a newsletter that those potential donors might find useful. Then you can acquire the right kind of people, not by asking them to give at first, but first by asking them to engage more deeply. So number 2 is support your supporters. And the only way you can support them and give to them is if you understand who they are and what they want, and you focus on them and their needs, and less on your process and what your boss wants, which is they just want the money. You can't get the money, you can't get the assets unless you focus on individual people and their individual needs. That's just the way it works. If you treat asset-based giving transactionally, you'll end up with nothing but people dropping out of giving. Asset giving, you cannot treat it. It's not an extraction, a financial extraction process. There's a consideration continuum that donors go through before they take action. And then they decide whether they were happy with the gift that they made. The low dollar impulse oriented decisions, that this happens in a split second. But for the assets, it's going to take more time. Generally, it's going to be about 1.5 years, maybe even up to 2 years before the decision finally gets made. So I break these into why and how stages. There's also a what stage. Like first, you have to get to the heart of why someone cares and help them rediscover that and say it and rehearse it. Then you might get to the what stage, like what programs do they want to fund or be involved in, and then how. The how stage is where they try and figure out how are they going to give wisely so they can get the most out of their money from tax write-offs or whatnot. And as soon as that's done, then they're going to go back into the why stage where they reconsider, was that a good idea? Was the value good? Should I do it again? Should I do more? So you can build trust if you support your supporters and give to them, meaning help them think about their lives and reminisce, think about how they could be the hero in their own life story and gain a sense of belonging with others. You can't give them all that unless you understand them. So, of course, we're a little biased in this because I invented the survey platform now 14 years ago that's used by so many. And there have been some knockoffs and copycats. Unfortunately, the problem, if you don't cultivate people properly, personalized and relevantly, after they take a survey, they actually end up giving less. So if you don't show them that you know them after, you should never survey somebody as a research project is what I mean. If they don't feel that you listened and that you're actually attentive to their needs, they'll give less. It's been proven by my data. So be careful about doing surveys. And if you hear your organization or institution is getting on and doing that, be very careful. It's just a tool, and tools can be used to break stuff or build stuff. Unfortunately, too often people think donor surveys are for research. They're a engagement mechanism. And if you decide, I mean, you don't have to do it with MarketSmart. I give it away. I give everything I learned about this away. Not everything, but plenty. And you can get that in my free report or on my website. So another thing is VIP websites. Like most colleges and universities have pages like this, and then they'll have like, or any organization will have like one page about major giving and giving of assets. And it's kind of like a throwaway. It's like, oh yeah, and if you want to give us that stuff, call us or email us. And it's like, what? Like that's all you're investing in the 75% of the 76% of revenue? One page? Like, no. So what we recommend is a page like this, which is, again, a little biased because it's part of our system, is our system fairly automatically deploys these kinds of pages, thanks in part to AI. I think more people are now seeing what AI can do in creating words and images. But this page is more donor-centric for the people who want to be self-sufficient with regard to their giving. It's even got my DAF widget, which if you've all seen, you may not have. That's another tool I made for free for the sector that you could put on your page, whether you buy from us or not. But it helps people find their DAF and give from their donor-advised funds seamlessly. But more so, this is all about story. This is centered or catering to people who have assets, older people who want to feel a sense of belonging. They want to make an impact and see what that impact can really be like. And they want it to be convenient, right? So these are pages that our system supplies in addition to the survey and our automated cultivation that follows up with donors who take the survey until they are outreach ready and they signal to you that they want you to contact them. I'll get into that in just a minute, but because we're running out of time, I'm going to kind of finish up on the 3 suggestions. It's just when you have a site like this, it's important that you monitor where people click, because one click for readiness is different than another click. Like if you see that they click on the button to give from their donor advised fund, or they forward bequest language to somebody, that's really an important click. While if they were to just look for who's like them and donor stories, that's nice, but it's not scored, at least in our system, as important a click. Okay, so the third recommendation is that, again, give to your supporters. The law of reciprocity is really powerful. I always recommend, especially to colleges and universities or private schools, give them something like a yearbook, a digitized version of yearbook. Offer that. You know, target, invite them to re-engage and think about and reminisce about their history, their people, their values. Or if, for instance, someone, a donor wants to be interviewed, and then you could put that on social media, that gives them a high amount of what would you call it, notoriety and feelings that they're living out their version of what they want to live out. You could give them reports, you could give them toolkits, you could give them videos. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you could give them. And it's counterintuitive because people always tell you to solicit, but it's giving that works better than soliciting. It's the law of reciprocity. So those are the three strategies I recommend at a high level for how to combat this. Again, I want to thank you for attending today. I'm going to go real quickly into what MarketSmart does, and then we'll do some questions and answers. I can see there's a whole bunch in there. I'll try and stay on as long as I can to answer as many of them as I can. So if you were wondering, I was alluding to what MarketSmart does. We invented a system. It's a closed loop, kind of feedback loop system that starts with our proprietary survey system, where I call it tech-enabled donor discovery that can be easily scaled, right? And donors love this. There's a pent-up demand for this level of engagement. And once they take the survey, we use all the verbatims that they supply to us, and that automates cultivation. See, because most gift officers, if you're in major gifts or legacy gifts, you don't have time to read and then craft very well written emails. And frankly, you don't have the data and the research to know what subject lines and what words work. So our system uses the survey data that the donors give us, and then our system sends them cultivation messages over time that are never solicitous. In fact, the worst thing you could do is ask for money in these. The best thing you could do is provide value and convenience and support. So that's what these do, and they're based on what donors tell us. So they're highly relevant, get high open rates, and they look like they came from you, which you can always just turn it off once you have somebody who says that they want to talk to you. So, and then you have well, where do the emails go? Like when they click on an email, where do they go? Well, they go to the VIP zone of your website, which again is supplied by us, which I just showed you an example of. And we find that the people who go there end up giving 300% more. So what I'm saying is that this kind of a system that's automated so that you don't need more people. In fact, you might need less people. The system is less than the cost of a person. It never sleeps, never takes a vacation, never complains, certainly won't sue you for HR violations or something, but it will help people move themselves through their consideration continuum until such time they reveal that they're ready to talk to you. And that's what gets shown in your dashboard and through alerts, that they're hot and they have a score according to our algorithm, which was developed in part with Dr. James' research to help you understand who is the wealthiest, most passionate, and for whom the timing is right for your outreach. So you're not going on wild goose chases with assigned donors who aren't really, they may be well screened and qualified that way, but they're really not truly qualified. They haven't opted in and such. So that's what we do, is we help you get more meetings with people when they're ready to talk turkey about giving assets. So if you're interested in that, we'd love to hear from you. You can always, and I should remind you, yes, we have this amazing 10-to-1 ROI guarantee. Most of our customers over time get 100-to-1 ROI. It does take a couple of years, but yes, this one, of course, that testimonial, she got ROI right away. But most, we have a guarantee, and we recommend that you consider just taking one tiny percent of your budget, testing it with us instead of using postage and printing and all that stuff. Just take our challenge, and you'll get 10-to-1. We have never had to give money back to anybody. So you'll get 10-to-1 guaranteed, and probably much more. So I highly recommend that, of course. And with that, I'm going, well, you can always just get a demo. You click on the button on our website, and we'll be glad to talk to you about our challenge. So thank you very much, everybody. There are some links here about where you can find the fundraising report card, the benchmarks. You can buy the book or just email us and we'll send it to you. Connect with me on LinkedIn. And of course, there will be a survey after this event so that you could provide us some feedback if you would. That would be super, super duper. All right, so thanks for staying with me for the whole hour. I went over a minute, 2 minutes over, but now we'll get into the questions and answers. Is where can you find the DAF widget, Jennifer? At dafwidget.com, DAF widget.com, WIDGET. All right. How important is it to publicly acknowledge these donors, i.e. donor stories or program stories in your annual report? Anytime that you can tell success stories where not only did the organization win, which is good, but more so did the beneficiaries of the gifts sort of win a victory from the gifts, and did the donor win a victory, right? That is always very, very important for us. And yes, you want to publicly acknowledge that because they are victories and people want to go with winners, but people also want to envision themselves as being a person who's like the others who have won. Right. So if they feel that there's resonance there, they'll be more likely. The only caveat I would say, big asterisk here, is you cannot publicize something without getting the donor's permission. No, zero. That'll tick people off. A lot of people want to be anonymous. So I think it's very important. Let's see. How about populist fundraising with the association to awareness? I want more people to know what I do. Well, that's fine. Helping people know what you do is one thing, but it shouldn't be done. I think there's a misnomer that fundraising does build awareness, and it does, but it's not necessarily always positive awareness, especially if people find your fundraising to be crass or interruptive or extraction oriented. Okay, so be careful with trying to build awareness through fundraising. They're different things. You should build awareness first, help people get involved or subscribe or opt in, and then give them a survey to find out who is most ready to consider giving assets, and then engage them. Keep it separate. All right. Do I have data on the average cost of acquiring the different class of donors? I don't. I have seen some data on this over the years. It's generally had been about 1-to-1. In other words, you break even on getting new low dollar donors, but major donors, it's more like, I mean, you get like a 50-to-1, like I just showed you, 50-to-1 ROI. So the data, it's not even close. The cost of acquiring low dollar donors is just, it doesn't make sense. It's just so expensive, and the lifetime value is so dismal. I think organizations should be acquiring people who care and who want to subscribe, who want to involve themselves, maybe even who want to volunteer, and then search the data or invite people to take surveys to become major donors. Let everybody else self-navigate for the low dollar gifts. This will freak out a lot of people on the call, I know, but just look at the data. The fundraising pyramid of old, it just doesn't exist. Okay, is it possible that donor retention is decreasing because donors are regrettably passing on? Yeah, Melanie, yes. That's exactly, yes. Short answer. All right. Do we know how the informed public splits on the capitalism versus socialism? Unfortunately, no, I don't. That's an Edelman, or I forget which study that was from. So sorry, Rodrigo. Jessica, any potential impact from social media and things like GoFundMe and the like? I'm going to have to pass on that one because I'm not exactly sure what that really means. Sorry, I'm going to go quickly here. Okay, so there's more, just a couple more questions. Strokes. Okay, I'm just looking through the chat instead of the Q&A to see if there's any other questions. So if you have one more question, I don't really see any more here, but if you have another question, yeah, so here's an interesting one from Christina. Wouldn't this approach mean that everyone is asking more from the same wealthier donors as the donor base shrinks? Yes, yes, but no. So, you know, it's funny in the phrasing, and Christina, I don't know you, so I really have to soften this a little bit, is that it is interesting the way that you've phrased it, because you said, would this not mean everyone is asking more from the same wealthier donors? See, the mindset that you're asking more, like, you're not actually. First, you want to engage and build trust with the same wealthier donors. The truth is that 98% or 95% of the people on this webinar, and or I should say their institutions and organizations, will not heed this warning. So they'll keep treating those major wealthier donors the same way, asking them, right? If you treat them differently and you give to them, you support them, you ask them about them, not ask them for money, they will trust you, the relationship will thrive, and they'll even come to you and say, but what can I do that I'm not already doing? Okay, I know it's counterintuitive, I know it's hard, but that's the truth. I see it every day. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up, everybody. I know that there are other questions buried into the chat instead of the Q&A, but since we're already about 10 minutes over, I'm going to thank you all. Please take the survey when you exit. There should be a pop-up for a survey. Thank you for another year. I'm sorry the news isn't as good as I would have hoped, but there is a way to fix it, and we can help you. So if you're interested, please let us know. Thank you.